It's my pleasure to be here with Lucille and Sheena to talk about faith-based organizations in community development. I am Michael Rochford. I'm the Executive Director of St. Nick's. I've been there forever. It seems I was not a founder. I was a project manager and Director of Economic Development, and about 13 years ago became the Executive Director. Our organization was founded in 1975 by the Social Action Committee of the St. Nicholas Roman Catholic Church. And what prompted them to found this company was a fire which took place on a vacant lot on Power Street, about a block from the church. And that fire destroyed a row of housing. You know, we're in Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and like our joining community in Bushwick, there's many wood frame row houses, and they all have these connecting, they call them cocklofts, and fire often spreads. Even up until today, we still, when these fires happen, they often take out whole rows of buildings and they leave these big vacant lots. And so there were 18 families that were left homeless by this fire, and the Social Action Committee, the church, got together at first to try to find housing, clothing, and so forth for the families that were left homeless. And as they completed that task, they became determined to rebuild on the site. And we had the good fortune, being in Brooklyn and not far from Pratt, to get some technical assistance from the Pratt Center. They and a few others comprised an advisory group, and they directed the pastor of the St. Nicholas Church that what he wanted to do was form a community development corporation, a 501c3 company. And I think in those days you were encouraged not to have that direct relationship with legal relationship with the church, and so it was an independent, non-sectarian organization. However, the pastor remained the chairman of who was the founder, was the chairman for 15 years until his death, and we've maintained a historic relationship with the church. Successive pastors are on our board. However, from the beginning, we've also had Pentecostal pastors on our board. We've had really a good representation from the diverse ethnic and racial groups within our community. And so although it's had historic roots in the church, it's always been an open tent and to try to welcome everyone in our community to join. We had a very large volunteer base, and organizing has always been, as a community development corporation, has been key to our approach to addressing problems within our community. One of the first things that Pratt helped our pastor, Monsignor Walter Vitro, to do was to develop this vacant land. And it just so happened that the church, the Diocese of Brooklyn, owned a building that was also vacant adjoining this vacant lot, and the church donated that property. And from that came in lightning speed for our world. And within 5 years, they opened doors to 150 units of senior housing known as Jennings Hall. It combined the renovation of this old building that was formerly the nurses' residence for the old St. Catherine's Hospital, which happened to be across the street, and a new wing, which together comprised 150 units. This was a tremendous shot in the arm to our community. This was a community where the city was in deep fiscal crisis, had abandoned construction on a new 4,000-seat high school across the street. The church's own high school had closed, although its grammar school continues to be very strong and vibrant today. We saw huge disinvestment, redlining. Much of what you heard went on in the 70s and the 80s was profoundly impacting our community, and there was a huge flight of people out. So for a little band of neighborhood folks with a few technical advisors to be able to pull off such an enormous achievement within a 5-year period of time really gave the community hope that there was an ability that it could take on much greater challenges. And from the beginning, with this large volunteer base, it began to focus in 3 areas. One was economic development, one was housing, preservation and development, and the other was taking care of the elderly. And in each case, everything started with volunteers, no resources. In fact, the only grant we had, I think, in the first 3 years came from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, and it was about $10,000. Otherwise, we had about 20 staff who were all unemployed people hired through the CEDAR program, but we had no operating money. And many staff, were their job to really go out and hustle their neighbors to try to put together the pens and pencils. We didn't even have computers. I know when I started saying I had to bring my own phone, it was very much a grassroots feel, but a huge sense of determination and commitment. And through the 90s, we were pretty successful with housing redevelopment. Today, we've rehabilitated or built new construction over 2,000 units of housing. We manage 1,100 units of housing. They're still in our portfolio. The remainder was sold off for home ownership within our community. We've partnered with many other organizations. Los Odes is a partnering organization in Williamsburg we're working with, as well as other faith-based groups. We also moved into the area of economic development, and there our approach was again based on organizing, was to help other constituent groups really deal with key problems. So one of the areas we focused on was organizing merchants. We had a lot of abandonment. About 25% of the stores in our commercial district were abandoned. So we began organizing them and then approached the Department of Small Business Services. They helped us with some resources. We went into the industrial development area. We have a very large industrial base, about 20,000 jobs. At one time, we began organizing businesses there under the name of the East Williamsburg Valley Industrial Development Corporation. They've all become strategic partners. They're quasi or fully independent, but we continue to be allied in the focus of how to build our community. As a community development corporation, we were encouraged by the Local Initiative Support Corporation to take on what we called in community development second wave revitalization strategies, rebuilding the fabric of community life, focusing on young people. And we began in one development where we had permanent housing for formerly homeless families, 20 units, but we had 90 children in the one building, and probably one of the most active drug markets right outside that property. And we were horrified to see our young people out interacting and providing cover and unattended for the drug dealing activity. And it took about 5 years to get rid of the drug dealer that really ran that corner. Of course, it took just to arrest him. He had many other people engaged in it. But we tried to take the kids off the street, and we ran a youth program in the basement of that building, and we bring funders in, and they say this was not a really quality program. So we had to learn how to really provide high-quality services for young people. And also, springing off that, we began to focus on workforce development. Although we always did job match through our Industrial Development Corporation affiliate, we really began on focusing on how we could help what at that time was about 1/3 of our community was dependent on public assistance, and how could we move them into permanent, sustained employment and real career opportunities. And we formed it's not an independent affiliate, but it's a program known as Williamsburg Works, which today places about 350 people in permanent jobs. We've moved into skill training, higher wage jobs there as well. Today, Synagogues has 5 operating divisions, so it's housing, economic development. Home health care has now grown into probably a larger single activity. We serve 800 elderly people throughout Brooklyn, all of Brooklyn now, as well as our youth and workforce development. Well, I haven't gone on too long.
You've done well. Marty will join us when Marty joins us. Sheena, I think I read that actually Abyssinian started with only a $50,000 grant. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the early projects described were volunteers from church, parishioners who had some expertise. But the first grant to officially incorporate institutions was a $50,000 grant.